Hey friends, how are you doing? How are you enjoying this? I know it feels like I'm doing a huge data dump to you, and you are probably sitting there going like, all right, I'm so sick of her voice, and I am so sorry. Anyway, we're going to keep on going because this is a huge chapter. It talks about interests in real estate. There is definitely a lot of definitions here, and I'm going to just remind you again to know that your glossary is going to be a critical piece to your learning. And that's why at the last minute I decided that I would give you the definitions as we went along. Okay? And how to maximize this unit is you're going to have your book open to the unit. You're going to have your recorder ready, your voice memo or your phone recorder on Android, and you're going to have it ready to record. You've typed in the title, which is Unit 5, Interest in Real Estate, and you're going to follow this timed module with me. Okay, completing each task, including all quizzes. And the quizzes are not graded. There will be an opportunity on the quizzes to give me any information that you want. There's always one open-ended question, and you must complete them to move forward. And what happens is when you are finished with that last part of the quiz, which is at the end, you are then, if you haven't noticed, you are then sent a badge of knowledge. And you'll get a badge of knowledge after every module. What we will do is your certificate will be, based on that we have all your badges of knowledge, essentially. Okay, so again, we'll do it by email, and you could just save them in a folder. We'll talk about that in one of the outside, one of the training modules. Okay, I mean one of the like onboarding modules for you to check out. Okay, again, you can pause or rewind for review. You cannot skip forward. Okay, and you're going to use the audio that you're creating later for review. Okay. On the right below this module, there is a live chat, which is where you and all of your peeps are, and you can talk with each other. We will answer you right away. Or you can have questions which are emailed to us, and we will answer also right away as soon as we can. The only times that I think that we will not be answering you right away would be in the thick of the night, okay? And most of your learning has to be done with us. So I think we're good. Okay, so interest in real estate. Ownership of a parcel of real estate includes all or some of the bundle of rights, depending on the type of interest a person holds in the property. Okay, so do you remember from Unit 1, we talked about that deep sea bundle of rights? Ownership may be limited by public and private restrictions intended to ensure that one owner's use and enjoyment of the property owned does not interfere with the other's use and enjoyment of their property or at the welfare of the general public. Okay, and we'll talk about that. Our objectives today in this unit are to identify and describe the various types of estates, explain the differences between liens and all the other types of encumbrances, and explain the limitations of private property rights for the welfare of the public. But first, let's dig into our key terms for you to record. Again, you're going to find them in the book, and I am going to read them, the term, the definition, and then I'm going to go on to the next word, okay? So condemnation. Condemnation is a judicial or administrative proceeding to exercise the power of eminent domain through which a government agent takes private property for public use and compensates the owner. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs. It's private agreements that affect land use. They may be enforced by an owner of real estate that benefits from them, or they can be included in the seller's deed to the buyer. Deed restrictions. There are clauses in a deed limiting the future uses of the property. Deed restrictions may impose a vast variety of limitations and conditions. For example, they may limit the density of the buildings, dictate the types of structures that can be erected, or prevent buildings from being used for specific purposes, or even from being used at all. Easement appurtenant, the right to use the land of another. We're doing easement first. It's the right to use the land of another for a specific purpose, such as for the right of way or utilities, an incorporeal interest in the land because it does not include the right of possession. Okay, easement appurtenant. Easement appurtenant is an easement that follows along with the land. Easement by necessity is an easement allowed by law as necessary for the full enjoyment of a parcel of real estate. For example, the right of ingress and egress over a grantor's land. Estate in hand. The degree, quantity, nature, and extent of interest a person has in real property. Fee simple. The highest interest in real estate recognized by the law. The holder is entitled to all rights to the property. Fee simple absolute. The maximum possible estate of right of ownership of real property, continuing forever. Fee simple defeasible. An estate in which the holder has a fee simple title that may be divested upon the occurrence or non-occurrence of a specific event. There are two categories of defeasible fee estate. Fee simple on condition precedent, and in parentheses I have fee simple determinable, and fee simple on condition subsequent. Fee simple determinable. A fee simple estate qualified by a special limitation. Language used to describe the limitation included words so long as, while, or during. Okay? A fee simple subject to condition subsequent would be an estate carrying the limitation that if it is no longer used for the purpose conveyed, it reverts to the original grantor by the right of re-entry. Inverse condemnation is the action brought by a property owner seeking just compensation for diminished use in land of value because of an adjacent property's public use. Legal life estate. A form of life estate established by state law rather than created voluntarily by an owner. It becomes effective when a certain events occur. See dower, curtsy, and homestead for legal life estate used in some states. Okay, and in Massachusetts it's actually a little different, so we will talk about that when we get to Massachusetts. Okay. License. In real estate practice, the privilege or right granted to a person by a state to operate as a real estate broker or salesperson. The second definition is the revocable permission for temporary use of land, a personal right that cannot be sold. Life estate. An interest in real or personal property that is limited in duration to the lifetime of its owners or some other designated person or persons. I think I got out of order there, I'm sorry. Lien, the right given by law to certain creditors to have their debts paid out of the property by a defaulting debtor, usually by means of a court sale. And then police power. The government's right to impose laws, statutes, and ordinances, including zoning ordinances and building codes, to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. Okay, so how are you guys doing on those? Did you also say yours into your audio? Are you audioing me? What are you doing? I'd love for you guys to send in the chat box what exactly you're doing here with these terms. Okay, easement by prescription. An easement acquired by open, notorious, continuous, hostile, and adverse use of the property for the period of time prescribed by state law. Easement in gross. An easement that is not created for the benefit of any land owned by the owner of the easement, but that attaches personally to the easement owner. For example, a right granted by property owner to a friend to use a portion of the property for the rest of the friend's life would be an easement in gross. Eminent domain is the right of the government or municipal quasi-public body to acquire property for public use through a court action called condemnation, in which the court decides that the use is a public use and determines the compensation to be paid to the owner. So the right of taking over this land is called, God, I'm just having a blackout here, is called eminent domain. The process of doing it is condemnation, okay? The right is eminent domain, the process is condemnation. That is always on the test. Okay, encroachment. A building or some portion of it, a wall or fence, for instance, that extends beyond the land of the owner and illegally illegally intrudes in the land of an adjoining owner or a public street or alley. Reversionary interest. The remnant of an estate that the grantor holds after granting life estate to another person. Taking. Process of land being taken for a property owner for public use through eminent domain with a requirement that the owner be compensated fairly. Taxation. The process by which a government body raises monies to fund its operation. Encumbrance. Anything such as a mortgage, tax, or judgment lien, an easement, a restriction on the land or use of the land, or an outstanding dower right that may diminish the value or use and enjoyment of a property. Escheat. The reversion of a property to the state or county as provided by state law in cases in which a decedent dies intestate without heirs capable of inheriting or where the property is abandoned. Freehold estate. An estate in land in which ownership is for an indeterminate length of time in contract to a leasehold estate. Future interest. A person's present right to an interest in a real property that will not result in possession or enjoyment until sometime in the future, such as the reversion or right of re-entry. Homestead. Land that is owned and occupied as the family home. In many states, a portion of the area or value of this land is protected or exempt from judgment for debts other than those secured by the property. Okay, so we have homestead laws in Massachusetts. Okay, pour autre vie, for the life of another. A life estate, pour autre vie, is the life estate that is measured by the life of a person or persons other than the grantee. And interests in real estate. The remnant of an estate that has been conveyed to take effect and to be enjoyed after the termination of the prior estate, such as when an owner conveys a life estate to one party and the remainder to another party. Okay, so we had some significant vocabulary there. I hope that you guys are still with me. Okay, so let's review some of our terms. So the fee simple estate, as I mentioned, is the highest interest in real estate recognized by law, and the holder is entitled to all the rights to the property. Okay, so this is what we mostly see when we see types of ownership, okay, or ownership interests. The fee simple defeasible is an estate in which the holder has a fee simple title that may be divested upon an occurrence or non-occurrence of a specific event. There are two categories of defeasible fee estates: fee simple on condition precedent, which is fee simple determinable, and fee simple on condition subsequent. Okay, so basically what this means is that something is either going to happen or something is on the condition that something happens, okay, and something from that interest happens, okay. So for fee simple determinable, what that means is that a fee simple estate qualified by special limitation. Language used to describe the limitation includes the words so long as, while, and during. Okay, and now bear with me. So the fee simple subject to condition subsequent is an estate carrying the limitation that if it is no longer used for the purpose conveyed, it reverts to the original grantor by the right of re-entry. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example here of, say, Uncle Charlie left or gave interest to John for the use of a property so long as it was used for a camp, okay, a summer camp. And then once that summer camp was done or no longer used for that purpose, then by this thing, by the condition subsequent, it would revert back to Uncle Charlie. Okay, so that would be an example of how that would work. So the types of estates that we have, okay, the estate in land would be, I'm going to just describe it again to you and then we can talk about it a little bit, is the degree, quantity, nature, and extent of interest a person has in real property. Okay, so again, we're using land as that real property piece. Okay, A freehold estate is the estate and land in which the ownership is for an indeterminable or indeterminate length of time, in contrast to a leasehold estate. Okay, so there's not a determined point of time on this. Okay. A life estate, which is something that we see a lot of times if a person's becoming elderly and they want to transfer ownership of their property, yet they want to live in their property until they pass away. So it's an interest in real or personal property that is limited in duration to the lifetime of its owner or some other designated person or persons. Okay, so on a life estate, what will happen is they will grant somebody ownership of their property with a life estate, meaning that they can stay there. Okay, so pour autre vie means for the life of another. And so this is a life estate that is measured by the life of a person or persons other than the grantee. Okay, so this could be if somebody was, was a guardian or some sort of oversaw somebody else's, property or whatever. And this could be, again, if somebody was in a diminished state and they didn't, were not able to take care of themselves or something. But pour autre vie truly means for the life of another. And so if you see that question, that would be what you would be wanting to look for. Okay, so we talked about in the last slide about, like Uncle Charlie's camp or whatever. And there's two different things that can happen if that estate or that interest was no longer used for that use. Okay, the remainder means that the remnant of the estate that has been conveyed to take effect and to be enjoyed after the termination of the prior estate. Okay, such as when an owner conveys a life estate to one party and the remainder to another. Okay, so Uncle Charlie could have specified once it's no longer used as a camp, then the estate will go to another person. So the remainder, the person who remains. In a life estate, they often will make the remainder person a person who would then get the property after that life is over. Okay. Now, in a reversion, just like the word revert, what do you think it's going to be? Okay, it's the remnant of the estate that the grantor holds after granting a life estate to another person. Okay, so it reverts back to them. Okay, so I'll give you an example. My brother Tom, basically bought Papa's house and granted him a life estate. And what would happen after that life estate, when Papa was gone, was that it would revert back to Tom. Okay, so a revert means back to the original person. A remainder means that there's another party that's involved. Okay, so our legal life estate is a form of life estate established by state law rather than created voluntarily by an owner. It becomes effective when a certain event occurs. Again, this is the dower and courtesy and rights in Massachusetts. We'll talk about that because it's a little different. And then homestead for legal life estates used in some states. Okay, so a legal life estate is something that was created voluntarily. I mean, not voluntarily, it was created by state law. Okay, so legal life estate, think of the law. And homestead, and that's the land that is owned and occupied as the family home. In many states, a portion of this area or value of this land is protected or exempt from judgments for debts other than those secured by the property. Okay, so many times when a home is transferred to a new owner, the lawyers will also file a homestead, which gives them some protection against debtors. Okay, there are the mortgage and the taxes are two things that come into play on this. However, a homestead is pretty much just filing it. It's like $50 to do, and it gives you a protection. I think in Massachusetts up to $250,000. Okay, so let's talk about encumbrances and liens. Okay, so our first stop is at easement, and again, the easement is a right to use the land of another for a specific purpose, such as the right-of-way or utilities, and a corporeal interest in the land, because it does not include a right of possession. Okay, so an easement could be a utility easement. It could be, it could be the easement that the town uses for something. It could be, there are a multitude of easements that are out there. Deed restrictions or private restrictions would be clauses in a deed limiting the future uses of the property. Deed restrictions can impose a vast variety of limitations and conditions. For example, they may limit the density of buildings, dictate the types of structures that can be erected, or prevent buildings from being used for specific purposes or even from being used at all. Okay, other restrictions can be, anything. It can be that they are not allowed to, they are not allowed to use their back lot for, animals or commercial or whatever. There's a lot of different types of restrictions that can be, structured. And a lien is a right given by law to certain creditors to have their debts paid out of the property by defaulting debtor, usually by means of a court sale. So where we see this is, like a mechanic's lien. If a mechanic did some work on your house and you didn't pay them, they could file a lien against you. If you didn't pay someone, or if there was a judgment that was against you, like even like a credit card debt that you didn't pay, or a student loan, all of those are recorded against your property. And if you transfer your property, then those would also, be paid off basically. And we will talk about the order of how those liens work in another topic, or in another subject. Okay, so we'll get to that. We'll come back to that. And then encroachments. Encroachments are any of those structures or trees or whatever that are on your property that don't belong there, basically. And I'll tell you an example. I had a property down by the water, and a shed went from being on the neighbor's property to being on their property. And so what we had to do was the shed had moved, and now it was encroaching on their property. So we had to move that shed again. So the hurricane moved it there, and we had to move it back. Okay, so deed restrictions. Some deed restrictions that we have seen are covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And again, I'll just give you the definition on that. Private agreements that affect land use. They may be enforced by an owner of real estate that benefits from them, and can be included in the seller's deed to the buyer. Again, a lot of deed restrictions that we've seen have to do with subdivisions and condominiums and topics like that. There's also been things like, usage for people to use the water. A lot of things go into the deed restrictions that we've seen. Okay, so easements. So let's talk about the easements that we're going to see. The first is easement appurtenant, and that's an easement that follows along with the land. Okay, so again, back to like that electrical easement, that's going to go from the land, that's going to stay with them. A lot of times they'll talk about like deeded beach rights, and an easement appurtenant on that would say that it follows with the land. Okay, that's something to check. When someone says it's in the deed, you always want to check to see if it runs with the land, if it runs with the owner. Okay, an easement in gross is that one that is not created for the benefit of any land owned by the owner of the easement, but that attaches personally to the easement owner. For example, a right granted by a property owner to a friend to use a portion of the property for the rest of the friend's life would be an easement in gross. And I'll give you an example that happened with us. There was when a property sold, and the woman who was selling it always let her sister, canoe down at this little corner of the lot, and she wanted to have as an easement for, basically she wanted it for an easement in gross for her sister. And so she was looking for that to be the case. And then, it was a little tricky. I'll finish telling you that after I give you my next two definitions. So the easement by necessity is one that is allowed by law as necessary for the full enjoyment of the parcel of real estate. Again, for an example would be the right of ingress or egress over the grantor's land. Okay, so this would be, if you had a driveway that covered over a portion of someone's land to get to your back area. Easement by necessity means that if you have the right to access your land, and so easement by necessity says that you have the right to figure out the best way. Well, you have the right for the best way to be figured out on how to get there. Okay, and then an easement by prescription is an easement acquired by open, notorious, continuous, hostile, and adverse use of the property for a period of time prescribed by state law. Okay, so in this case, that would be, if somebody always used a certain spot, they felt like that they owned it because they always used it, and what they would want to do is they would want to have it as their own. So there's a lot of steps in this, and I'll quickly just tell you, I had a person who had cranberry bogs, and they had an easement by necessity, but there was a couple ways you could go in. So they wanted to solidify that they were able to go in the way that they wanted to go in. So what they did was they created it as an easement by prescription, and they said that they've opened all of those things openly, notoriously, hostilely, and used that period for a period of every other day for a period of 20 years, and they never had anyone say that they couldn't, and so they wanted that easement by prescription to even be more solid than that easement by necessity. I hope that helps. Okay, terminating an easement. An easement terminates when the need no longer exists, when the owner of either the dominant or the servient tenement becomes sole owner of both properties, by release of the right of the easement to the owner of the servient tenement. Okay, so there's a dominant tenement and a servient tenement. And so let's use that driveway going through a portion of a person's land. So who would you think would be the dominant tenement, and who do you think would be the servient? So, my first thought was, well, if they own it, then they should be the dominant person, right? But it's not, it's the opposite. So how I remember it is the person who owns the land that is serving their land to that person in the back who needs that driveway. And then the person who drives over to get to their lot would be the dominant tenement, okay? By abandonment of the easement, and then by non-use of the prescription easement. So again, back to my cranberry box. Say they stopped doing the cranberries, and they stopped driving back there, and they no longer used that. That could be a possible termination of that easement. Okay, so licenses, personal privileges given for a specific purpose. Okay, so that would be, in our case, the privilege or right granted to operate real estate, broker or salesperson. So you will be licensed. The revocable permission of a temporary use of land, a personal right that cannot be sold. So there's a lot of different licenses that we will see as our definitions. Okay, generally what they're looking for is that permission. License equals permission. Okay. Encroachments, illegal extensions beyond the boundaries of the land. Okay, we talked about the encroachments a little bit, about that, about the shed that moved, okay, or the driveway that goes over to the other person's land, or the tree that's hanging over, making it dangerous for the other person. So the stump of the tree is on the land of the owner, okay, and then the branches of the tree are over their neighbors, okay. That's an encroachment, and that's a danger to them. Okay, and it's the responsibility of the person where the roots are, basically, to take care of those limbs. Okay, and a lease pending is a pending legal action. Okay, it's a recorded legal document giving constructive notice that an action affecting a particular property has been filed in either the state or federal court. So a lot of times when you take a listing, you're going to go and make sure that there are no lease pendants on anything. Foreclosures, we see a lot of that there. Again, it's doing your homework, and we'll talk again about this in a much more detail as we go forward. Okay, so government powers. So what can the government do, and how do they do it, and how do we mostly see it in real estate? So the first is police power, and it's basically the government's right to impose laws, statutes, and ordinances, including zoning ordinances and building codes, and to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. Okay, so even though we own that property, the police have power over these certain things for us. And again, we talked about eminent domain, which is the right, okay? It is the right of government or municipal quasi-public body to acquire property for public use through a court action. Again, the process called condemnation, in which the court decides that the use in the public use is for a public use, and determines that the compensation to be paid to the owner. So they decide that they need to put that new highway right through your land, and the process that they give to you is condemnation. So there's some really interesting stories, in the little old lady that has the little house in the middle of the freeway that wouldn't go, and all that kind of stuff. So, but by and large, when they go to put in a road or something like that, this is the process they go through. And again, the condemnation, I'm just going to give you that definition, is the judicial or administrative proceeding to exercise the power of eminent domain through which a government agency takes private property for public use and compensates the owner. Okay. Now, taxation is the process by which the government body raises monies and funds its operations. And a cheat is the reversion of property to the state or county as provided by state law in case where there is not where a decedent dies intestate, right? We're going to learn about intestate. That's without a will, without heirs capable of inheriting, or when the property is abandoned. Okay, so the police, the government powers have on that too. Okay, so for Beyond Our Unit, you're going to read through the key points, reviews in the unit. You're going to read them into your audio. You're going to read the questions and answers into your audio, and are you right or wrong and why? You're going to go to Quiz Bank and customize the quiz. Again, those two bottom boxes you're going to click on, and you're going to have yourself in the position for that. You're going to take the quiz, recording your thoughts and how you did, and you can send us your recording for the use as accountability, and text us or email us or go into live chat or go in the questions below with any questions. And we are your team. My name is Kate, and we have Dawn and Marie here to help you at all times. Please let us know how we can. Thank you. Be bold, be awesome, be you.